really trying to establish a community where you're trying to raise families. And so it was also around the time the crack epidemic hit. And so we set up patrols. We basically established, first of all, the Salat 5 times a day, where we would call the Adhan over a loudspeaker 5 times a day. And
now, when you first started doing that, was there any like adverse reaction to that from the
no
community?
adverse reaction, because again, there was one old lady that she's passed on now. She, the newspapers interviewed her and asked her about the Muslims, and she said that, I like walking around the park, but I won't walk around that park unless I see the Muslims out there. So that we brought in a sense of safety, specifically in the area that we're in. And so there was no, I can't even remember any resistance to it.
Was there any positive feedback about the Adhan being, I mean, do people have questions about it?
Even to this day.
Right.
One brother, he asked, well, who called it at this time? He wants to know because he's grading the Adhan. This is non-Muslim. And he said, who called it? You know, I had to happen to be the one that called it. And so they love it. And they say they call it the prayer. You know, who's calling that then? And then one lady, because our community is being regentrified, so there's a European-American lady lives right behind the mosque. Her house lives next to the mosque, and she refers to us as the brothers. Could you ask the brothers to do it? Anytime she has a problem, she knows the brothers are looking out for her. And so one time there was a guest that came in, and he got on the mic, and his Adhan was the best Adhan. And she came to me, Nadim, that's not a karaoke machine. You can't just let anybody on there, you know. And so, and then there was one man who used to live in her house. He said he got up by the Adhan. That was more of his alarm clock. And so it has become the West End is a unique part of Atlanta, where you have Muslims, you have Rasta, you have Hebrews, you have what's called Black nationalist Christian. So you have this convergence of probably every major religion, Buddhist. You have everything in the West End, and so everybody is respectful of one another. And so the Adhan is really just right at this time, it's a staple of the West End right now. You know, there's a man, he happens to be of another faith, and he say he likes sitting on his porch in the morning and listening to the Adhan. So it's you know, just hearing that, it brings about an air of tranquility to anybody who hears it.
Right. And so the safety security which was brought to the neighborhoods when the community was established, it extends to the Muslims as well as the non-Muslims in that area.
You know, and that's how Muslims have to think. Whenever like I remember reading some research that was done about zakah, and it said that if Muslims paid their zakah, they said that there will be no poverty among Muslims. And then the research even went further to say there will be no poverty on the planet even after all the zakat was paid out to all the Muslims. You know, so it's the same thing. When we go and establish an area, then the Muslims aren't the only one to benefit from, you know, lack of criminality, lack of drug dealing, lack of, you know, prostitution and things like that. So the safety is extended, you know, to anybody that lives in that area. And you can see every Muslim society was like that. People used to travel. It was the place in Ethiopia where they had 80 masjids in that area, this town, and how this Frenchman visited there. And I don't know if he took Shahada or not, but he went back to France, packed up, and moved back, moved to Ethiopia and died there. You know, and so when we practice our deen, if we did it on, you know, from a worldwide perspective, then the whole world would benefit from it.
Right. And what do you feel, I mean, there are a lot of misconceptions about Islam and Muslims, but what do you think is really at the root of that? Is that people don't have knowledge about Islam, or people just don't encounter Muslims to see their lifestyle and how they live and how they carry themselves?
I think the root of it is that the Muslims are not doing the necessary amount of dawah, and they're not allowing people to see them as people who are just trying to raise their families, just trying to be human beings. We're human beings first, and then Islam sort of decorates us. It decorates our external as well as interior. And so I think if the Muslims did the work, because we have the resources to counter, like for instance, we had, there was a problem with some of what they call the neoconservative people here, the Horowitzes and the, what's the name, Pipes, Daniel Pipes, and some of the talk show hosts, and they have this concept called Islamo-fascists. They had an Islamo-fascist week. And so...
And what did that consist of?
It basically is trying to tie Islam into a fascist type of movement. And they're trying to say that the American Muslims, as well as Muslims in general, are a threat to the Western way of life. And so, you know, we had to counter that. We took some of the Discover Islam posters, and we did interviews, and we basically did articles and countered the negative perception, because the people who try to present a negative impression of Islam, what they tend to do is they have plenty of wealth behind them. And so...
Yeah, that's true. And it seems like there's a whole industry about promoting a negative image about Islam. You know, if you write a book about how I become Muslim, not too many people are going to buy it.
Right.
If you write a book Why I Left Islam, it's a bestseller.
It's a bestseller.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that the monies have to be presented like what you're doing, the media, the internet, movies. You know, they have to be funded. I even watched. I went to the movies to see. Was it the Iron Man? And it was interesting. And they showed me how influential the Muslim lobby has become. In that movie, there's no mention of Islam, even though they're in Afghanistan. They did not. The people that they called the guerrillas in Afghanistan. When you look at the movie, you know that they're Muslim. But in the past, they're in there saying, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, none of that. And so I was really impressed with that. But it showed.
Or you hear the adhan right before something bad.
Yeah, and I don't think I even heard the adhan in that movie. But, you know, that's the first time. Otherwise, you see people making salah and all that. None of that in this particular movie.
Right, right. So let me ask you, Brother Nadeem, what is your, you were here in the Islamic Center for Counseling and Guidance. What is your role here, and what do you think the importance of this type of center is to the Muslim community?
Alhamdulillah. My role, I'm one of the counselors here, and, you know, a lot of the work that I do, what I do in general, I'm a professor, what's called a licensed professional counselor, and, you know, that's what I do for a living. I work at one of the hospitals here in Atlanta. So I do that throughout the week, and I also have a private practice where I, you know, see people, non-Muslims and Muslims, in my private office. And so a lot of what I get from the Islamic Counseling and Guidance is the referrals for mostly people who are suffering from mental health issues, you know, and then also we do a yearly conference, and I do classes, and we also do classes here, what we call the marriage classes, the marriage workshops, and I'll talk on conflict resolution, how to basically have marriages, because a lot of times people get married and there's no rule book that comes with marriage. And so what we try to do here is offer services to Muslims who are contemplating marriage so they can understand the responsibilities of marriage. And each of us will cover a different area. And so my area has been dealing with conflicts and also substance abuse, because again, we talk about the dangers and how that impacts the family, the whole family, if there's substance abuse. I also do premarital counseling, and also while people are married, and also divorce mediation. You know, and so those are some of the things that I do, because I feel that the beauty of what we do here is that we offer these services from an Islamic cultural perspective, where you can go to non-Muslims and get a similar service, but you can get it, you know, with the person who's familiar with Quran, familiar with Hadith, familiar with the Islamic family system. And so people who come here, they come here with, you know, basically they can be relaxed and know that their culture will be respected. And that's the beauty. We should have one of these in every city, and Muslims, you know.
I mean, you've traveled around the country a bit. Do you find, do we have enough of centers like this one?
No.
And you mentioned the dynamic of the people doing the counseling, also understanding the culture and the religion of the people who they're talking to.
Yeah, and I've also, even when the general counselors that I work with, I just finished the training with non-Muslim counselors, and what I did is made them aware of all the Muslim. They didn't know they were Muslim. They're getting Muslim clients, and then they start talking about issues that they have no experience in. I said, well, there are tons of Muslim counselors. I gave them the address here, as well as there's several other Muslim counselors here, and that they could consult with or refer the people to. Because,
but let me ask you, being a Muslim and having an Islamic perspective, even with your non-Muslim clients, does it give you a different insight in how to deal with non-Muslims also?
In that a lot of, just like with politics, a lot of my peers in the counseling field would try to separate spirituality and religion from a person who's mentally ill. When a human being is a whole human being, we're mind, body, and spirit. And so what Islam has given me as a counselor is that basically it helps me to counsel people from that holistic perspective and encourage them the importance of nurturing that spiritual side of themselves. And so that's what my non-Muslim clients, they get that, and they, you know, they are like the moths to the light in many instances. They come, you're so peaceful. They want to know, you know, where am I drinking from?
Do you get that comment a lot, that the people see you as being peaceful, or
a lot.